So we are up to Umanikas Buna, a woman, one of her responsibilities, one of her chiyuvim is to nurse her child. Leiman Masnisen Deloike Beishamai. At first glance, it seems, and the Gemara is going to be like this Lamaskana, our mission doesn't seem to be consistent with Beishamai. The Tanya we learned, Nadra Shaloi Lahanek Espina. A woman made a nether that she would not nurse her child. Beishamai Oimim Shoimet Estad Mipiv. Meaning Zakrashi Loi Sanikenu, she's not allowed to nurse this child anymore. Shechol nether. Her nether was chal. It's not like she has a legal responsibility to, and therefore she cannot ask herself with a nether because she doesn't own it. Rather, she doesn't have a chiyuv, and that's why when she makes this nether, she cannot nurse this child. Alma loy mishab delay. You see that she's not meshuvah to nurse. So this is the Gemara's suggestion that Beis Shammai disagrees with our Mishnah. It doesn't matter if she swore. She doesn't have the right to swear. It's not within her ownership to decide yes nurse or not nurse. And therefore, she can be forced to nurse. Rashi says, the mishabdele, because she's meshubit, v'loy chol haneder, her nether has no validity at all. What about miskarsha? Once she's divorced, she doesn't have a chiyuv anymore to her husband to serve him. Einai koifa, you can no longer force her. But v'mhoya makira, what if her child already knew who she was? And therefore, Rashi says, she'einai roitza leinek me'acheres. Now that this child has bonded with its mother, it will not nurse from anyone else, and now it's in a life-threatening situation if the mother won't nurse this child. Therefore, noisin lo schara, he would have to pay her umenikdai mipnei asakana, and then the koifa. If he has to pay her, but she could still be forced because it's a sakana for the child if she doesn't nurse.
Yosy, by Moshe Rabbeinu, and I believe Rashi says that Moshe didn't want to nurse from someone who's tamei, and now we see that it's a question of being accustomed to one person rather than anybody.
Right. So I think Moshe Rabbeinu, even before he was accustomed to anybody, he didn't want to nurse from a goya because of his kedusha. But a normal child wouldn't have a problem.
His mother was nursing him for 3 months already.
Was she?
Yeah.
Because she was already born 3 months ago. Maybe she didn't nurse him in order not to create that bond.
Right.
But you're saying good, because if she already did nurse him, so forget the fact that she was a goya. Any child, even not on the level of Moshe Rabbeinu.
Right, that's my question.
Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to nurse. Any child would have nursed once it's already accustomed to it.
Right.
I hear. It's a good aura. It's a very good aura. I don't know. Very excellent point. So Zok to Gemara, Afilu Temi Beis Shammai. Maybe we can still make Beis Shammai consistent with our Mishnah that she has a responsibility to nurse her child. But Hacha b'may askinan kegoyin shenodr he v'kayim lahu. It's speaking where she made a nether, but we know that he has to agree to the nether. So if he agreed to the nether, that's why there's a shayla. The Kesubos Beis Shammai who noisen etzba bein shinel. In a case where he agreed to the nether, that's why chometes dad mipiv. That's why her nether is a good nether. But if he didn't agree to the nether, of course, she would be mechuyev to nurse. The Basilis Avri, he nosna eitzva ben shinel. It's her fault. She made a nether. Similarly to a machlokes that we discussed earlier, if a husband is mekayim a nether, does he get blamed for the full nether, or is he just an accessory, but she gets blamed for the nether? Frank the Gemara, if that was the whole shaila of whether or not he gets blamed for a nether that she made, so why is there discussion here b'dafka by this unique case of nursing? Why aren't they arguing about anything that she denied as one of her responsibilities? And the question is, does she lose her ksuba for that denial, or does he take responsibility? Because if that's the whole shaila, if he's responsible for a nether that he was mekayim, well, then it's not just specifically in this case, any case, and we could have picked a more common case. Tanya, we happen to have a brisa that says explicitly that Beis Shammai says she doesn't have a responsibility to nurse her child. So we're forced to say that our Mishnah is inconsistent with Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai says a woman does not have a responsibility to her husband to nurse, while Beis Hillel holds that she does. So it's very interesting. A mother would normally want to nurse her child, but there's the emotions and the want, and then there's what her legal responsibility is. So Dr. Rashi on that, why pick a weird case with nursing? Pick a regular case. She made a nether that she won't give him hana, as in any of the other responsibilities that she has. The kaimla, and then the husband was mekayim the nether. And in that case, it's a much broader array of cases. Elamai, it can't be a general machlokes about whose fault the nether is. It's got to be something specific to the shaila of nursing. And in fact, in fact, there is a machlokes b'shamay b'sil. B'sil holds a woman is responsible. She owes it to her husband. It's one of her responsibilities to nurse her children, and b'shamay holds not. The Mishnah says that if this, not the Mishnah, the Brisa that we just learned says that if this child recognizes its mother, and now there's a concern that it won't nurse from anybody else, then we can force her to nurse, although if she doesn't have the legal responsibility to nurse, her husband might have to pay her to nurse her own child, which is in fact what Basya Baspari did. She paid Yocheved to nurse her own child. Zoktamar at kama. And Rashi says, what's the question? At kama chadoshim islan l'meimar shoyedeya la'akira meilenek mishacheres. How many months or how much time does a child have to nurse from its mother to say that it created this bond, and after this bond was created, the child needs its mother? So interesting, David. According to Rabbi Yehuda, 3 months. If Yocheved gave up Moshe 1 day before those 3 months, then he wouldn't have been attached to her. So then it's not fair anymore that it was only because of his kedusha that he didn't want to nurse from a non-Jewish woman. But if it was a little bit less than 3 months, even a couple of days, even 1 day, maybe he wasn't bonded. He didn't have that natural bonding yet. So according to Shmuel, I don't know how we would answer your kasha. Rabbi Yitzchak Amar Rabbi Yochanan 50 days. So according to Rabbi Yitzchak, for sure, it's easy to understand why by Moshe Rabbeinu it wasn't an issue, because even though he was already nursing for 30 days, it didn't create that bond. So it was only his kedusha that made him refuse to nurse him a goya. Amar Abtimi bar Abaye, halacha Rabbi Yitzchak. We follow the halacha that Rabbi Yitzchak said, Shomar Mishom Rabbi Yochanan, who stated in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that it's 50 days. Zok Gemara, Bishlam Rav Rabbi Yochanan. I understand Rav Shita, and I understand Rabbi Yochanan Shita. 3 months or 50 days. Kol chad v'chad ki chorfei. Every child is different as to how quickly they develop that bond. Morning. So Rashi is kol chad l'fum chorfei. The second line on the top of the Amud in Rashi. Yes, shenik charev u'makira b'chamishim yom. There are those children that are sharp and create a bond in 50 days. And there are some who takes 3 months, which is what Rav said. So Bishlama, Rav and Rabbi Yochanan Kolchad B'chad Ki Chorfei. Elul Shmuel, who says that it's 30 days, Ki Hai Gavna Mimish Kachazlo. And there's different shots in how this question is explained. One shot is it possible that a child can recognize and bond with his mother so quickly in 30 days? And the other shot in this kasha is, how is it possible to do such a variant between the different shitas as to how long it takes for a child to bond with its mother? Ki also Rami by Yecheskel Amar, Lo yisatzisinu lahani kloli dechal Yuda Achi mishmei deshmuel. Forget about all these rules because they're not true. Here's the rule. Hachi Amar Shmuel. Kol zman shemakira. There's no specific dates, times. It's all assessed each child individually. So Rashi Kol zman shemakira ain't shir l'dover ela b'bedika dover toli. You just have to see if the child is going to be willing to nurse from somebody else. Im on the royim shemakira. If we see the child recognize its mother, and therefore will only want to nurse from its mother, kaifa you force her umanikta yigaschar. But if not, no, and there's no time period, specific time period prescribed. Rather, you have to look at each individual child, where they're holding. Hahida soy lakamei de Shmuel. There was someone who came in front of Shmuel. And Rashi was a grusha l'hasharoitza lahanik. So a husband takes an ex-wife to her. She didn't want a nurse, and he said, "Shmuel, my ex-wife doesn't want a nurse." So Amar le Rav Dimi bar Yosef. Shmuel told Rav Dimi bar Yosef. I guess Rav Dimi bar Yosef was I wanted the Shem Mossam in the best. And he said, "Zil Batka, let's do a test to see if this child in Makira," Rashi says, if this child is already bonded with its mother. So what did he do? They literally did like a criminal lineup for them to pick out the person in the lineup. Azal Oisva Bidari Dinashe. They set up a lineup of women, Vishakli Labara, and they took this child, and they brought the child close to each mother to see if the child would look up to the mother and would connect. When they got to the subject woman, have a kamasvi lapa. Rashi says masvi mabit. The child was looking at the mother. Clearly, this child recognized his mother. She didn't want to be responsible to nurse, so kav shetinu la'enamine. She turned away so that they won't have eye contact. Amar la. So I guess Shmuel told her, Nataf einecha, raise up your eyes and look at your child, and kum dari barich, come carry your child. In other words, we caught you. This child is bonded with you, and we could force you to nurse, even though your husband will still have to pay. Frankly, if the only way we know if a child bonds with his mother is if they lock eyes, suma minayada. What if the child is blind? How would we know if this child has already bonded? Amarbashi berechu b'taima. A child will still recognize its mother by the smell or the scent of the mother, and by the taste of the milk. So the child, we could still check to see if this child has bonded with the mother. The norm is that a woman will nurse for 24 months, and there's a question if it means 2 years. So if there was an ibiyar, it in fact would be 25 months. But mikan veilach, after that period of time, kiyonik sheretz. It's a little bit disgusting to nurse so long. Rash's kilu yonik davar mashukitz. It's like she's nursing a davar mashukitz. And there are those who learn that it's going to be an isur d'rabbanan for a child to nurse. It's like the child eating something that's usur to eat. There are those who learn that even though it's not considered a maichel asura, but we know when one eats non-kosher food, in addition to the aver, it's metamtem esalev. So this davar meshukatz are those Rishonim will learn that even though it's not an isser, but it will cause timtum halev. Divir Rabbi Eliezer. That's the.
How could that be? It's not a sheretz, or it's not anything trait. As a matter of fact, it's chol of Yisrael.
It's chol of Yisraelis.
Yeah.
I don't know, but that's what he says. Divir Rabbi Eliezer. The Gemara is going to get into the makar of if a human's milk, if a mother's milk is mutter to drink, if it's not mutter to drink, so the Gemara is going to get into that. Mikan ve'elach chiyonik sheketz. Divir Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yeshua says, Afilu arba v'chomei shanim. It's the norm to nurse even 4 or 5 years, and Tosfos has 2 pshatim in what 4 or 5 years means. Because is it 4 or is it 5? So Tosfos says 4 or 5 years is just a figure of speech, and it just means however long it seems appropriate in that particular case. Tosfos has another pshat that a healthy child should stop nursing after 4 years, but a child who's weak might have to nurse for 5 years. What happens if pirish la'acher esum v'arba chodesh? Even according to Rabbi Yeshua, where the norm would be to nurse for even up to 5 years, what if after 24 months the child had stopped nursing, and then the chazar, and now is going to start nursing again? That's already inappropriate. Once again, that's kiyonik sheketz. So, David, based on what you asked, it can't be a problem with the issue of drinking the milk, because this is the same milk. How would, if the child stopped nursing or not, how would that impact the milk's kashrus? So it must just be the idea of milking is considered a davar meshukitz, and that's why there's timtum halev.
And there's a story of, I forgot who it is, some gadol. He used to make a bracha before he took his mother's milk.
How old was he?
I didn't say, but he made a bracha.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Did he make his mother cover up before he made the bracha?
I don't know.
I hear. Amar Mar, Mikan ve'elech. After that point, it's kiyonik shekets. So we're going back to what Rabbi Eliezer said, that nursing more than 2 years is kiyonik shekets. I'm going to ask you a kasha to prove that there's no issue at all nursing and there's no issue drinking human's milk. Because the Brisa says as follows: you would have thought that the milk of a person who's referred to as someone who walks on 2 legs is tamei. And Rashi says, what is mahachishtayim? The cholav shalisha hamaleches b'shtei raglayim. She walks on her 2 legs. You might think it's tamei. Rashi that means osir. So it doesn't mean tumah when you touch it. It means osir to eat. Vidinu. And there's actually an argument to make that it should be tummy. Uma behema, she kalta b'mago, ma becha behema, that when it's alive, it will never ever be tummy. A live animal can never be tummy. There's actually many shatim and rishonim what this means. But Rashi learns that behema will never become tummy when it's alive. There are those who learn that when the behema is dead, it's only mitama you b'magu v'masa, but it's not mitama you for 7 days. It's only a single day tumah. It's not a tumah chamura. But whatever the case is, behema, the tumah of a behema is much less severe than the behema of a human. Nevertheless, hechmarta b'chalba, the milk of a non-kosher behema is aser. Hechmarta b'chalba kadarim b'b'chayris gamol shnei pamim chad le'eser chalba. The milk of a gamol is aser. So adam, a human, shechmarta b'magoy, a human who is tamei when they're alive, meaning a nida. So a behema will never become tamei when it's alive, but a human could become tamei when it's alive. And like a nida, a zav or a zava, there's many, or a mitzayir, there's many tumas on a human that when they're alive, surely its milk should be aser. So why is it that milk is mutter? There's a strong argument to say that the milk of a human should be aser. So to Gemara, Talmud Leimer es hagamo. The Torah addresses the gamo as hagamo himayla geira hu. So we darshan hu tamei. This is the Gemara that I'm reading from is an older Gemara. But if you have a newer Gemara, there'll be a little ice over here, and it's not going, which tells us that the hu here is not going on Maila Gera hu, it's going on Tamei hu. And we darshan hu tamei, the gomo is tamei, the ein chalav mahal chishtayim tamei. But the milk of someone who walks, meaning a human's milk is not tamei, ella tahar. Let's hear what Rashi says. Hu tamei. Oh, this is weiter in the Gemara. To do what? To make it full size?
Yeah.
Sure. Is that it? Okay. Zok to Gemara. Yochel. You would think oitzis a chalav she'eno yishava b'chalav. The chalav, Zok Rashi, I would say is mutter. Why? Sharei b'tahar tahar. Even the milk of an animal, it's only the milk of a behema tmeah that's tamei, but the milk of a behema tahira is tar. We drink milk. So I would have thought that what type of milk, what type of liquid that comes out of a human is mutter? Milk, because even by a behema, its isser is not so severe. It only applies to a behema tmeah. But but the dam of a person maybe will be ulcer, because the dam of every animal, whether kosher or not kosher, is prohibited. Talmud Leiber hu tamei ve'ein dam mahachishtayim tamei. The blood of a human is not tamei; it's not usher. Now Rashi tells us that this is referring to a different part of the pasuk, not hu tamei. So hu tamei is Rashi either mechat kra nafpele, either we're learning it from the same tamei hu that it says by Gamo, or could be it's earlier in that pasuk. It says a zeh toichlu or zeh loy toichlu. At the beginning of the pasuk, there's another word zeh. Lishachrin zeh. Right, at the beginning of the pasuk, when it talks about the gomel, it says achazel teichlu, and from the zeh we learn zemi utahu. So therefore, we learn that the dam of a human is not usher. Look, there's a chi of course. If you eat dam, that's only dam of an animal. Dam of a human is actually only usher midirabana. Elatar. V'amar Rab Sheshet said, "Afilu mitzvahs prisha ein boy." There is not even a mitzvah midirabana. Rashi says, "There's not even a mitzvah midirabana for dam." I'm sorry. There's not even a mitzvah of Issa midirabana to drink human milk. So, Frek the Gemara, how could you say that after 2 years, according to Rabbi Eliezer, and after Rabbi Shua, after a pause, it's considered sheket, it's kiyonic sheket, as if there's an issue involved? We have a mefurish pasuk, the Hu Tameh, where we learned that human milk is 100% mutter, and there's not even an issue derabana. Rashi's ein bite the midaraisa shari, rabbanan nami legozerbe, darminin chalam malchish dayim tar. So if that's the case, how could you argue that to be usher? So sure, if you have human milk in a container, 100% it's mutter no matter what age you are, because we have a mefurish pasuk that says hu tameh, but milk of a mahalchish time is not tameh. What's considered sheket is nursing directly from the mother. That's the sheket. So it's not the milk that's the sheket; it's the action of nursing directly from the mother. Look, Rashi had the parish. Hadagatani mutter is kishapirish midade isha lechli. It's already in a keli. Vayonik minadad is kiyonik sheket midirabon. The thing that's not nice is if it's nursing, but if the milk is pumped and it's in a bottle, there's no problem with using it no matter what the age is. V'chalufa b'dam. And interesting enough, it's exactly the opposite by dam. By milk, you're not allowed to drink it directly from the woman, but you're allowed to drink it if it's in a container. By dam, it's exactly the opposite. Directly from the body, you're allowed to eat your blood, but you're not allowed to eat the blood once it's left your body. Kiditanya, we learned. Dam shal gabe kikar. What if you bite into a piece of bread and your gums are bleeding and now there's blood on the cookie? You're not allowed to eat that blood that's absorbed in your cookie. You have to scrape off the part that has blood on it, and then you can eat the rest. But if you have blood in between your teeth, your gums are bleeding, you don't have to spit that out. So you can just suck it out and swallow it. And you don't have to worry. So you see, it's exactly the opposite. If it's in your body, directly from your body, there you're allowed to eat it. But if it's out of your body, you're not allowed to. Rashi says, because no one sees it. This is a loaded Rashi. Because Tosfos asks, if the whole reason why you're not allowed to drink dam that's out of your body is because of Marasayan, people aren't going to know that this is human blood. They see blood, they think you're eating the blood of an animal. But there's a rule that whatever is osir al Marasayan is even osir bechadre chadorim. It's even osir if nobody sees it at all. So therefore, how could we allow you to swallow the blood that's in your mouth? It's bechadre chadorim, and that's osir because we know something that's osir al Marasayan is osir even bechadre chadorim. So the Rishonim speak about this, and most of them answer that the reason why it's mutter over here is, and when do we say something that's osher atzmar sign is osher even b'chadri chadorim? That's if by definition this thing could be taking place where people will notice it, and it could also take place where no one will see it. That's something you're not allowed to do wherever. But if it's something that only occurs where no one will see it, such as inside your mouth, there's no problem of marasayim. There are those Rishonim who even learn it one step further, that if it's something that no one will ever see, even if it's possible for it to occur where people will see it, there is no din of marasayim. Omar Mar said, Rabbi Yeshua Omer, afilu arba v'chamesh shanim. A child could nurse even for 4 or 5 years. Frek the Gemara Vatanya we learned, Yeshua Omer, afilu chavilas el ksefov, which is even seemingly older than that. He's already a child who's carrying around things. Zok the Gemara, idi v'idi chat shiuru. That's the same shear. A child who's 4 or 5 will already wear its knapsack. Amar Rabbi Yosef, halacha Rabbi Yeshua, halacha Rabbi Yeshua. In fact, that someone could nurse for 4 or 5 years, which is consistent with the story that David said over, that there's a story about a gadol who made a bracha before he nursed. Zogt Heilige Gemara weiter. Tani Rab Marino is Omer. Goynech, someone who is Hamiyalel Mikev Libo. He's having heart trouble. He's having chest pains. So what does he do? Yoinek Cholov b'Shabbos. He's allowed to nurse from an aiz, from a goat. He could nurse goat's milk on Shabbos. Rashi says, what does that mean? He's nursing goat's milk. So Rashi Mishum Refuah. Urefuasoi Cholov aiz. That is what will heal him. My time, Yoinek. Why is he allowed to be Yoinek? The problem is there's an Isser Mefarik, which means he is separating the milk from its source, from what it's connected to. Right? Mefarik is Hanoitek Dover Mimokim Shagadol Boy. If someone disconnects something from its source, from the place where it grows, and this is the milk from the animal, the Loimin HaMechuber Elam Atolish. He's not separating it from a chuber. It's not like pulling an apple off a tree. That's koitzer. Rather, he's separating, and this is compared to if you're threshing wheat. The wheat is already disconnected from the ground, but when you thresh it, you're now disconnecting the seed, the fruit, from the shell around it, and that's called the dosh, threshing. The told of the doshu shemefarik tuvua mikashel. So here too, you're separating the milk from its source from the mother. There's a big shaila in the Rishonim what the malacha here is. Rashi clearly says it's a told of dosh. There are those who learn it's a told of koitzer. There are those who learn that it's mimachek, it's smoothing things out, which is a different malacha. It's smoothing out, I believe, is a malacha that's in the Sidura. I believe that it's in the Sidura of preparing wool, smoothing out, but I'm not 100% sure. So there's a shayla in the Rishonim precisely what malacha we're referring to. Rashi holds we're referring to the malacha of dosh. So my timer, Yoinik, why is he allowed to? It is a tolda of the malacha of dosh. He's not doing it in the normal way. Rashi says, "Shein derech b'nei adam leinik el alach biyad." People don't drink directly from an animal. Normally, they'll squeeze the milk out into a container and drink it that way. So since he's doing it kalach yad, the makom tzara loy gozu rabbanon. The makom tsar, the rabbanon were not gozer, and they let you do an iser de rabbanon. Tosfos says, of course, we're not speaking about a sakanas nefashos, because then he could do any malacha. This is merely if someone's in pain, someone's suffering, we'll waive an iser de rabbanon of mefarik kalachayad. There are those who learn, I believe the Ran learns, that we never allow a heter when it's an iser de rabbanon, b'makam tsar, only al yedei nachri. A mir l'nachri is the only de rabbanon that's allowed. The fact that you're doing a malacha personally with rabbanon is never allowed. The only de rabbanon that's allowed is a mir l'nachri. Normally, if you tell a nachri to do a malacha deraisa, that is a de rabbanon. But if it's b'makam tsar, then a mir l'nachri will be allowed. So the question here is, how did they allow him to drink directly from the animal, where he's doing it himself? It's not on the mir l'nachri. So the Ran says that this is different. We're learning that he just needs the goat's milk. The normal way to extract the goat's milk would be to milk the goat. He's doing it with a shinoi, he's drinking it from the goat, that's why it's allowed. The Ran says, the only healing for him is if he drinks the milk directly from the goat. So he needs to drink it directly from the goat to heal him. So even though normally only Amir La'akam would be mutter, b'makam refuah, here the only possible refuah is if he drinks it himself, and therefore he's allowed. Rabbi Yosef said, Allah Rabbi Marinos, we pass him like Rabbi Marinos, that this would be allowed. Tanya Nachem ish Gali Omer, Sinar Sha'olu Boy Kashkash. Someone who had a pipe that things grew into it. Kashim, hard twigs, vasovim, or grass, soismin, uma'atim es chiluchay. It stops the flow. So we're talking about a down pipe. If you have your downpipe from your eaves trough that get plugged, I can tell you what happens. You end up having mold in your walls because the rain backs up. It doesn't drain away from your house. It seeps down your wall into your foundation, and it's going to ultimately flood your basement. So you need to keep your eaves troughs clean. I learned that the hard way. So what happens if you have eaves that are backing up, and because of that, it's backing up onto the roof, and your roof is leaking? So even on Shabbos, you're allowed to deal with it. You're allowed to squish it and squeeze it out with your foot on Shabbos to break up the debris so that the roof will drain properly. And you don't have to worry. My timer, what's the reason why it's allowed? Misakin kalachiyatu. Breaking up the blockage with your foot is not the normal way to clear out an eaves. Rashi says, I'm sorry, I'm the wrong kalachiyad. Kalachiyad, ayidei shinui, beragloi. Normally it's not done with your foot. These are all Rabbi Yosef's halachas. We're quoting Rabbi Yosef's halachas. So Rabbi Yosef says that you're allowed to clear out a blocked eaves with your foot. Rabbi Yosef halacha kanachim ishgali that you're allowed to do that. So where is this relevant halacha l'maisa? Are you allowed to plunge out a blocked toilet on Shabbos? So in fact, this is a major machlokes amongst the late achronim. So I'm going to list off those who are mater and those who are aser, so that if you ever ask a shaila, you'll know who to ask. So Reb Moshe holds that you're allowed to plunge a toilet. I believe Reb Sternberg holds you're allowed to plunge a toilet, but Dayan Weiss, I believe, held you were not allowed to plunge a toilet on Shabbos.
Someone that said that you should use your left hand.
You should use left hand. So you should do it shinui, but most people hold that al tkavod abrius you are allowed to plunge a toilet on Shabbos. But everybody should ask their local rabbi. But it seems like the pasha should be allowed to. There isn't really an actual malach involved in plugging the toilet, other than maybe uvda the chol. But most of the heintige boys can hold it's allowed. There are those who hold it's not allowed. Zok Gemara weiter. Pirish la'acher esrim va'arba chodesh. If a child stopped nursing after 24 months, the chazer kiyonik shekets, which is what Rabbi Eliezer said. The chama, how much time does this children have to stop nursing in order that we consider it a stop that now makes it also to continue? If the child stops nursing for 3 days, so he didn't just say it; he quoted a brisa. There are those who say that this only means if the child was perfectly healthy and the child stopped nursing. But what if the child couldn't nurse because the child was not well? That's not considered that the child stopped nursing. A woman who was nursing a child, so for 24 months after she had a child, she's not allowed to marry another man for 24 months from the birth of her child that she had with her first husband who passed away. Ad esrim va'arba chodesh divrei meir. She has to wait 24 months before she could remarry. Why? What's the problem? So Rashi shamet is other. What if she becomes expectant? V'tistrich ligmor laspana, and she'll have to stop nursing. The problem is you would have to now buy this child food. But if she doesn't have a father, this child does not have a father to buy this baby food. Ubal if her new husband is not the father of this child, that'll go out and buy him eggs and milk. Rabbi Yehuda already allows after 18 months for her to remarry. Why? Because if the child only nurses for 18 months, that will be enough. This machlokes of 24 months or 18 months is the minimum nursing responsibility is totally the machlokes of B'Shamai B'Silo. Sheb'Shamai Arbim Esem Arba Chodesh, Sheb'Silo Arbim Shmoy Nasa Chodesh. Reb Shimon Gamliel, Ani Achriya, I'm going to pass as follows. Even if you hold that the baby has to nurse for 24 months, you she'd be allowed to marry at 21 months. You know why? Because even if she becomes expecting right away, it takes 3 months for her milk to dry up. So she'll be able to nurse during her first trimester. And therefore, we can let her get married after 21 months because it won't impact her baby nursing. And for those who hold that the baby only needs to nurse 18 months, she'd be allowed to get married already at 15 months. Once again, the milk does not stop until the end of her first trimester, and therefore she would be able to continue nursing even if she became pregnant right away. Ama'ula, halacha Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda said 18 months. Li hitir Rabbi Chanina loses. Rabbi Chanina allowed me to marry an almana who was nursing lacha chamisha chodesh after 15 months. Arizeh de Abaye had a sharecropper. So sometimes when you do business with somebody who's not from, they'll always ask you shalas lalacha. They'll say, Sam, I have this wine. Am I allowed to drink this wine? Right? Anybody who's from has had a situation where someone not from asked them a shaila. So Abaye, of course, his Aris was from, but on his level, his Aris would ask him shailas. Arizeh de Abaye, also the Kamei de Abaye, came in front of Abaye. He told him, the Aris says, I want to marry this almana. She had a child 15 months ago. Am I allowed to marry her now? Erison, not Nisun. Chada the Rab Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Allah Rabbi. First of all, when there's a machlekes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, Allah Rabbi Yehuda, who says that 18 months is enough. So you see, Rabbi was batter. V'amar Ukva, and Rabbi Ukva said, Li hitir Rabbi Chanina losses lacha chamisha chodesh. So Abaye is quoting Ukva as having said that Rabbi Chanina allowed me to make nisuin, but there would be a bia already after 15 months. Kol shekein da'at le'oros. You, Abaye told this person, you're not asking me if you can make nisuin. Well, there'll be a bia. You only want to make an erisin now. Surely it would be allowed. So Abaye said you could do it. He also came to Rabbi Yosef. Then Abaye came to his Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef. Omer Lei, and Rabbi Yosef said, Abaye, I'm afraid you paskined wrong. Rabbi Shmuel, Domer Tarvayu, Shrich Alahamtim Esrem, Va'arba Chodesh, Chut Miyom Shenoilad Boy, V'chut Miyom Shenesarsa Boy. There has to be a full 24 months, plus the day that the child was born, plus the day that of the Erison. So if you're counting normal days the way we would count, it would actually be 25 months. It will be 24 months and 2 days. So Abaye realized that his Rebbe paskined against what he would paskin, which means he gave this Oris the wrong guidance. So he wanted to correct his mistake and stop the Oris from making the Erison as per the psak of his Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef. Rod Basrei plus a parsi. He ran after him 3 parsoyas. The Amrila parsa b'chala, or he ran after him 1 parsa, but it was in the sand. Did you ever try running across the sand on the beach? It's very hard to run. And Abaye was not able to reach the Oris, meaning the Oris ended up making Erison after 15 months, which Rabbi Yosef said was wrong. Amar Abaye, so Abaye got a real lesson from this incident. Hi Milsud Amar Rabbanon. This vort that the Rabbanon say, even a question about eating an egg together with a milch yedish, which is a simple shaila. A person should never paskin if his Rebbe's there. So if you're standing in shul and someone asks you the simplest of shilas, you should say, no, Rabbi Lo is here, go to the Rav. Even if it's something simple, a person should never render judgment on anything if the rabbi is there. And not because it's not respectful to the rabbi that you're paskening in front of him. It's worse. Remember, you're going to end up saying the wrong psak, just like what just happened with Mizok Abaye. Remember, you're not going to end up saying the right halacha, and you're going to get messed up. The ha'ana have a gemir nalei lahad Rav Shmuel. I knew Rav Shmuel's psak. I knew the psak that Rav Shmuel say you have to wait 24 months. Yet I didn't remember it to paskin that way when this person asked me. Nevertheless, I didn't think to say it So I should have never spoken at all. I should have told Doris, you know what? Let's go ask Rabbi Yosef.
Who was involved with Lily?
I don't know. Was it the film Goy? Okay. The Malbim was invited to speak in the same shul where his Rebbe was wrote.
And he didn't know that the Rebbe was there. And he didn't know he was standing in his place. So he was sitting in his place, sitting in the Rebbe's seat.
They put him in the Rebbe seat.
He didn't know that. And in the middle of the speech, the Rebbe came in. He said, sit, right? So he sat. And he said that even though he was successful, the whole parish on Tanakh, right? But he said that this one sefer that was written, the last one that he ever wrote in that series, he said that he attributed to this, that he did, a very tough decision.
And he listened.
Oh,
wow. Wow. Beautiful.
Yeah.
What if she gave her child to a menekes? Oy gomoltoi. Or this child was weaned off. The child was weaned off the mother. Oy meis, or the child died. Then mutaras linosim miyad. Then she'd be allowed to marry right away because there is no concern. There is no concern that the child will have a problem. Okay. So Zok to Gemara. Rav Papa, Rav Huna Bered Rabbi Shua, Savar Lemeved Uvda Kiyamas Nisa. They wanted a passing like this, meaning allowing a woman to marry after the child didn't need to be nursed anymore. Amar lahu ahi sapta. So this older woman told them, I had such a situation. But also Rav Nachman. And Rav Nachman said, even though the child died, or you hired a menekes, or the child was weaned, you still shouldn't get married. Any is that so? For Rav Nachman Sharalahu, Leberesh Kalusa. Rav Nachman allowed the Beresh Kalusa. Rashi says there were almonois in the house of the Reish Kalusa. Shahayu behen menikos, that there were some almonos that were nursing. V'nosnu b'neim l'menika v'tir l'nosai. And Rav Nachman allowed these women to remarry right away as long as they had a woman to nurse them. So the problem is how could you say Rav Nachman said it's usher if Rav Nachman was matal of Reish Kalusa? So Gemara shiny Reish Kalusa deloy hadabrahu. If they hired someone to nurse them, when you're dealing with the Reish Kalusa, there's no way these women who were hired would go back on their contract. But any woman, the person who they hired to nurse would not be afraid to go back on the contract. So just because you hired a woman, it doesn't mean that this child was guaranteed to have a mother to nurse it. The woman who made up to nurse these children, Ureya Laksaba, she would be afraid to back out of the deal because you're talking about the Beresh Kalusa. They're scary people, they're intimidating. But any regular person, it's not enough to arrange that the child should have someone to nurse it, a wet nurse it's called, and then the Chayzer Ben Eitzel Aim Umistakin. Because what's going to happen is that what if the Manika backs out? Then the mother has to take the child back. The mother is expecting now, and the child can possibly die. That's why Rav Nachman wouldn't allow anybody else, only for the Beresh Kalusa. Amalu Rav Papi, Ba'atun Loitis Barua Mechad Tanya. You wouldn't hold like this from a brayso that we learned. If she wanted to go home, or she had a shalom bayis problem with her husband, or her husband was locked up in jail, or her husband went to Medina Sayyam, or her husband was old or weak, or she was a woman who couldn't have children anymore. So all of these situations are women who would not be able to become pregnant. Vizakena, idleness, uktana, all of these women who it wouldn't be possible that they're pregnant or that they will become pregnant. Vamapelas, achar misas baila, or a woman who after her husband died, she had a miscarriage. So we know for sure she's not going to give birth to a child that will need to be nursed. Because whatever child she had, she had already miscarried. Or any woman who could not give birth, all those women, kulan shrichos lahamtim shlosh shechadoshim. They still have to wait 3 months. So even if there's no issue of nursing, you see across the board, there's a 3 months moratorium. Divrei Reb Meir. Rabbi Yosy matter le'aris v'linasim miyad. Rabbi Yosy does allow eris and nisuin right away. V'amar Rab Nachman Amar Shmuel halacha Reb Meir big zayroisa. And Reb Meir Paskin and Reb Nachman Paskin like Reb Meir that for 3 months you can never ever get married. Dr. Rashi, like this Bruma, Amar l'chusapta mishmei Reb Nachman. If this woman wouldn't have told you in the name of Reb Nachman that you're not allowed to remarry, even if you have a wet nurse, you would you not have known anyway that it's Aser? A woman who was Roiv Yomel, she never wanted, she didn't live at home, she lived by her father. So in other words, she couldn't have been pregnant. All these women in the list would not have been pregnant. Her whole I think it's called her whole uterus was taken out. So the halacha Reb Nachman said is halacha Reb Meir b'gzeiraisa, and Reb Meir said for 3 months she cannot remarry. Wherever Reb Meir is machmer over the rabbanon, we pass like Reb Meir. Even though there's no afchana here, there's no concern that she'll become pregnant, and we won't know whose child it is because we know for sure she was not pregnant until now, and in some of these women she won't become pregnant later either. When the Rabban make a gzer of 3 months, it's across the board whether their reason is relevant or not. The gozru stam shetamt in kol isha shloisha chadoshim. Every woman must wait 3 months. The same way there's a loy plug when it comes to 3 months. Zok Rashi, we should extend that loy plug to women that are nursing. Whether or not they found a wet nurse or not shouldn't matter. The 24 months is 24 months. That should remain constant. So the Gemara, Omrilei, Lavadite. You're right. I didn't think of that. The hilchos of the halacha is mace. If the child died, mutter, gomaltoi. But if she weaned the child, osir. Mar Barvashi Omar, afilu mace nami osir. Even if the child died, it's osir. You know why? Because if the child's death frees a woman from nursing, chas v'shalom, if you have a deranged woman, dilma kot lalei, maybe she'll kill her own child to allow herself to remarry, the ozla umintzava, and she will go and marry somebody in order that she can get married. However, in fact, there was a story, v'chanakte, and a woman strangled her child. Zokno v'loy, but from there you can't bring a right, because ahi shoytavoy, that woman was deranged. We don't make gzeres because there might be a deranged woman. A normal woman would never do that. It's not known that it's a common act for a woman to strangle her child to death. Rashi says, well, she might be forcing her child to be weaned earlier than the benefit for the child. So therefore we say that even if she was going with a child, she still cannot get remarried. Okay, 7:52. We didn't finish the Amud, but we'll stop here. We got close enough. We'll be mamshach tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be able to catch up tomorrow.
Yosy, you know what happened? What happened to Chaim Fuhrer? Is he around or what?
I have not seen him around. Is he back from New York? I have not seen him. He hasn't called in, so I'm not sure what happened to him.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.